it seems simple. It's like there's like a 4,000 foot mountain, that's it. But in reality, in life, there's all these lights and sounds and distractions, and you actually forget that you're even on a journey. You forget where you are and you forget where you're going.
Hey, this is the RootsUp podcast with the Greenhouse coaching team. It's where growth-minded leaders explore growing the life they want, starting at the roots. All right, welcome back to RootsUp. This is Steve Perkins, and I'm your host for this show. I'm also the founder of Greenhouse, and today's exciting because I've got Sundie Marquardt with me, and we are talking to Gabe Smith, the COO of Greenhouse. And Gabe, if you haven't heard from him yet, has got a lot of great thought leadership because he has an extensive background both leading people himself in a number of different contexts and also training and developing leaders and organizations. So we're talking about the topic of clarity. And if you clicked on this one, I'm sure you're feeling it the same way any leader does. There's some area or many areas where you feel there's a lack of clarity, or where the lack of clarity is causing problems and dysfunction and disengagement. We're just diving into all aspects of it. Why does clarity matter? Where's the problem, and how do we start to fix it?
Isn't people watching in lines fun?
Oh, I thought about writing a book actually called Lines because like as you travel the world, one thing you notice is culture of lines, and like in the British culture, it's queuing up.
Oh yeah.
And how I'll tell you what one of the things that hit us when we came back from South Africa was merging. So like in South Africa, everything's a roundabout. Everything's like, everybody's very into the idea that, like everybody's trying to go as far as possible. And then like everybody lets everybody in. And so you can have a massive amount of like, whether it's people or car, like it's fine to have like a massive group. Nobody's excited. But if you go on I-85 in Charlotte and there's this one exit, like where, if you don't get in line,
yeah,
there will be trucks that I've had it happen before where a truck will actually move over to block you from moving ahead. And it's like, you guys don't get it. You're supposed to use both lanes.
And they think that's fast. Yeah,
right? They think it's faster, but it's not faster.
Yes.
But I'm like, it's a culture of lines, right? It's like your value is like everybody get in line as soon as you can, start obeying the rule.
Yeah.
Like everybody in other cultures are like, no, like just get merged as soon as possible.
Oh, I heard an expert give a talk. This is so nerd. Push up my glasses. Because in engineering school, there'd be these experts. This guy wrote a dissertation on the traffic jams, how it happens. So I was thinking about it this morning because one person slams their brakes. Like they modeled it, they tracked it. It's like one person slams, then the next slams. And what causes the traffic jam a lot of times is just the domino of slamming. Yeah. So if everyone was in the flow state, like overseas, that would never happen.
Right.
Correct.
And we think that slamming and then gunning it is more efficient, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's just selfish.
Right.
But that's really interesting. It's like the people here don't understand roundabouts at all.
No.
I have to say they scare me a little bit.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah,
I was a little bit nervous as to what's happening.
And then go.
Well, I thought I had him figured out, and then I went to Scotland and about died in a roundabout with a lorry like that, because they don't stop. They're like, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You need to get out of here.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, I like your idea.
Lines?
Yes.
Let's co-author.
I think I could. I'm sitting here and my brain is going like this, like a Rolodex, thinking about of all the lines and observations I've made throughout my life and what I've actually thought about individuals and cultures and people and airports and stories and mothers versus
right? It's a whole thing. It's a whole paradigm.
There you guys go. Go ahead.
We could, and then we have a speaking series, Lines.
Well, you guys go do your lines later. Right. This is my podcast.
Okay, your podcast.
Welcome to Lines.
That'd be interesting. But no, we're not talking about lines.
Okay,
we're talking about clarity.
Okay.
So this actually feels like a very big topic. And Gabe, we're going to have you teach us about clarity today.
Oh boy, I'm going to get clear about it.
But here's what I was thinking, because first of all, I love, Gabe, that you're such a learner. I mean, everyone right here is a learner, but you're always trying to really understand something more or get to the bottom of it. And I've seen you do this in working with leaders, especially, like really pressing toward clarity. What I was thinking about is, so fascinating to me is the most frequent complaint that we hear in organizations is the lack of clarity.
Right.
It's like, what's our direction? What's our vision? What are the goals? What are we working on? Even at an individual level, people, when you really get to it, they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be working on.
Right.
Where should I be focused? What's my role? Who is this person's role? It's always a clarity issue. And yet, like, the topic of clarity, to me at least, sounds very simple. Like, well, just say it. Say what the goals are. Why is this an issue? It's so simple. Like, if you need to know the goals, say the goals. And yet it's this never-ending problem we hear over and over and over.
Right.
And so out of all the complex things in an organization, it actually seems like the simple thing about clarity is one of the main problems.
Right.
I don't know. I guess my main question to you is just why is clarity so elusive?
Well, I think that's a great question. I'll start with the way I think about leadership in general. You know, the predominant metaphor for me is that we're on a journey. We're on a journey together, and we're inviting people to go with us to a destination. I always like to think of it, one of my favorite places in the world is where we lived in South Africa. And, you know, they had these 4,000 foot mountains that just kind of, we were at sea level. And so they look massive, even though they're not really tall. They're really jagged, but they're very hikeable. And so, you know, I think about like hikes in that part of the world and how if you were guiding a group, like you would point and say like, okay, you guys see that mountain top in the distance? Like that's our destination. That's where we're going. And so I think about that, like with the leader task, it's like you're taking a group of people and you're going somewhere. And so like the two really important things is like, one is like we have to have clarity on where we're going, but two is we have to have clarity on where we're starting, you know? And
True.
I think why is it hard? I think that's a complicated answer. There's probably a lot of reasons, but I think it's because we live in a distracted world. That's the number one thing. We just live in a world where there's just so much noise. There's so much competition. There's so much competing for our attention, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's really easy. Like in my metaphor, it seems simple. It's like, guy, there's like a 4,000 foot mountain. That's it.
Yeah.
But in reality, in life, there's like all these lights and sounds and distractions, and you actually forget that you're even on a journey.
Yeah. You
forget where you are and you forget where you're going.
Yeah. No, it's a good point because the other part of this, like the other side of this coin is sports or like this hiking analogy where it's so easy. I mean, how many leadership metaphors come out of sports? Well, because it's simple. Like the goal is put the ball in the basket and it's always that goal and everyone knows that and it's not changing. So like we can know the destination and everyone agrees on it. But then in work life, it's a moving target constantly.
Right.
Or even like your example, well, the peak is the goal and we know that and we all agree on it and that's not going to change this whole hike. But in work life, that's not the case. And there's like competing priorities of different people and the world changes around you.
And I think we've got a lot of fear. You know, there's a lot of fear because when I name clarity, I put a stake in the ground and I name commitment, and that like can be a very daunting thing to do as a leader because you begin to wonder, am I right? Because we can never have 100% certainty if I'm right. You know, you start to wonder who's going to disagree with this perspective, and you don't know what to do with it. And I think some people maybe all of us at different points get paralyzed in that way.
100%. I'm sitting here thinking, like, my husband would love for me to have a conversation about retirement, and I refuse to have it.
Right.
Because if I have it, maybe it means we've decided, and I do not want to decide it.
Right.
I'm terrified. I don't want the clarity. I kind of like, and that made me think about when you were saying that sometimes it's personality things too, but I was thinking how you said, we have to know where we're going. So that peak over there, right? But we also have to know where we're starting. And I was thinking, man, I am so much better at knowing where I want to start. I can even rally people to start with me. Like that is,
let's go.
Yeah. But do you tell me which peak I have to go to? I'll look at all the peaks and think, well, I don't know. It depends on the weather. Like I might be in the mood for a shorter one. I might be in the mood for a longer one. So I was thinking there's probably so many personality types too, that some are better at we all can learn it. Do you agree? But some are better at staying focused on the destination. Some are better at the start. It's why we need a team.
Absolutely.
But that's where my brain went with my weakness is for sure to choose which mountain to hike. But where to start, I got you.
Right. That's that is interesting that we do have different, it's probably a good plug for leadership teams.
Yeah.
Right? Like that sharing that task, because you're right. Like I think I'm with you. Like I'm opposite from you.
Right.
Like
okay.
I would much rather
So we would be a good team.
We would be a great team. Sundie. Like I would much rather name the destination. I can
Right.
name that with a lot of clarity. But then I think when it's naming our starting point, because I think naming the starting point in leadership really is about naming pain. It's like, what's painful for me? And I think that for me right now in putting language to that is like, that's daunting because now I have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Now I have to own up to it.
Interesting.
It is a good point. Remember this has happened with teams a lot when we talk about internal versus external processors, but we had that team in here we divided them to different parts of the room, and the more open-ended external processors were on this side.
Yes.
Internal processors on that side.
Yep.
And then we started asking questions about kind of roasting each other. Like, what annoys you about them? And what annoys you guys about them?
Right.
And the main conflict that came up is exactly what we're naming here. It was the personalities who want to leave things open to change versus the ones who need it closed down and decided.
Yep.
And I remember in that moment thinking, yes, this is why you need team. This is why in relationships you need different personalities, because if it was all the people who want to leave their options open, then you would never decide. You would never arrive. It would just always be changing. But if you only had the deciders, then you would never pivot when it's needed and adjust course when it's clearly needed. But even though they annoy each other, they balance each other out in working together.
For sure.
Right. And I think that's like sometimes when you're the leader, you feel this burden of like, I have to be the one. Yeah. Like I have to know the destination. I have to be able to name all the things. And the truth is none of us are great at all that. Like we have to be, and maybe it is like our responsibility, but the question is like, what does it look like to invite others who may actually have a better vantage point or a different gift to be able to see, the thing.
Well, so let's talk about why clarity matters in leadership, in an organization. I don't know, wherever you take that, because you've been fascinated with this topic lately.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing is, and this is a lot of our working with different organizations and leaders, is that people are stuck, right? People get stuck in life, they get stuck in business, and they don't know how to get unstuck. They're just and most people are just fighting through the day to day. They're just trying to get to the next week, and it's just survival.
Yeah.
And I think most people are in survival mode, and they're to some degree living in chaos. And if they admitted it, like they feel like not in control and feel like I'm stuck in maybe a very key area, maybe a lot of key areas. And I don't know how to get out of that. And so the reason I think clarity is so important is clarity is the path to getting unstuck. And it begins with the first step in clarity is, I think the first job of leaders is to name reality. It's like somebody has to name what's real. And I do think it has to start with where am I stuck? What's really painful for me? What's really challenging right now? And when we begin to name that and we have the courage to name that, we can begin a process of clarity. But that's why clarity is important.
Yeah.
Because when we can get clear, we don't have to like have all the answers. We just have to be clear about where we are and where we want to go. And we can begin to chart a path. And something emotionally shifts, I think, once you make that decision.
It's like the clarity actually does begin with naming where we're at and why we're stuck. versus avoiding that or trying to operate in survival around that.
Right.
Also, I'm imagining that if I have a leader who doesn't have clarity, then my everyday looks a little like a whim. I'm going off of a whim,
Right.
like, all right, I kind of, or that leader might say something like, well, this week this week, because there isn't clarity. So it could go out a lot of feelings and, or logic, but without a clear, and the team is just kind of, they're surviving too. They don't even know they're stuck though.
Right.
Because they're just doing what, and you get it? Yeah,
Yes.
that's
an excellent point.
I will never forget this. We were in that one big company, you know what I'm talking about, Sundie, where we were part of it wasn't a survey, it was like a listening tour. It was something about gathering insights from people. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was like a design thinking type of approach. And it was trying to understand when people were most engaged in their job, like what drove engagement the most. Not the studies, not what Gallup said, but you in this organization. And the answer that came out was fascinating because it was almost unanimous. What people said was their favorite moment at that company. And you'd think it was when things were really fun. It wasn't. Almost unanimously, people said it was when they had the biggest crisis moment of the company. And it looked like the whole thing was going to go under. And when you got into the conversation, what happened was people were so engaged and loved and remembered that so fondly because all hands were on deck and they had clarity of where they were going.
Right.
They knew the mission.
Nothing like a crisis to bring some clarity.
Yeah. And they were working super late hours during that crisis. They had all kinds of painful things happening, but people reflected on it as their favorite time because there was, they didn't necessarily say it this way, but the consensus, the consensus was clear. It's because there was clarity of what the heck we're doing.
I think you guys are naming two sides of the same coin. It's really important to name, like Sundie, you're naming like there's a cost for people on a team when the leader doesn't have clarity. And that cost is confusion, lack of communication, and it creates a ton of conflict.
Yes.
Because now we don't know where we're going. And there's a lot of sideways energy and there's competition. I mean, just not the leader not being clear creates so many negative dynamics. So there's like this enormous personal cost and interpersonal cost and organizational cost.
Yeah.
And then Steve, you're naming the other side of that is like the benefit of clarity is that the motivation that it provides people when the leader does have clarity, all of a sudden it's like, let's go. Even if it's like a terrible crisis situation, but you're like, let's go. Like we're clear about what we're doing and we're going to do something hard together. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You and I were having a conversation around this recently. It was a little bit under the lens of strategic thinking, but that is a little bit about clarity sometimes,
100%.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we were talking, one thing that really stood out to me was how just to name the destination, the clarity, isn't enough to keep a team going.
Right.
That you have to revisit it often.
That's right.
Weekly, quarterly, on the path, shout it out again. It's like it has to be, they have to be constantly reminded. So it can never just be like, I speak of it once and then when we get to the top, we celebrate.
Right.
Because all that happens in between can be a lot of muck.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where because I remember in that conversation, we were talking about how we don't really believe in like the year strategic plan, 2-year strategic. I mean, it's fine to make those plans, but we really believe in working a 90-day burst around that because like we really need like a mini mission statement for a shorter period of time that keeps people oriented to where we're going. And you know what the funny metaphor I think of for that is I have my dog's a toy poodle. He's actually like a little bit overweight and he's 12 pounds. He's supposed to be 6 pounds, but we take him on a walk, he's double the size, right? And, but we take him on a walk. And what I learned about a toy poodle the hard way is like a long walk when you're 6 inches tall is like half a mile. Like that's tops, right? And when you're walking our little dog on the way back, he wants to quit. Yeah. Because to him, he's 100 miles from home and he has no concept. Like, what are we doing?
Where are we?
Even my little dog, you have to remind him and you go, hey buddy, we're headed home, and he knows that word home, right? And his ears perk up, and he's like, and it's that same thing. If it's like he's reminded of like, oh yeah, that we're going
that
word was the mission.
Yeah.
I remember now.
Home, let's go.
It's like
So in some ways, we all need that like motivation, right? Yeah.
Oh God,
it's a riot.
Picture. Okay, I don't know if this is a good question or not. I'm wondering how. So I'm trying to sit here and place myself in those shoes of like, okay, I'm a leader. I'm stuck. There's chaos. There's not clarity. What does it look like to decide to get clarity?
Well, that's a great question. I think the first thing is, there's, I think one of the most powerful words in the English language is help. I need help. And just acknowledging because you think about all that's laden when a leader raises his or her hand and says, hey, I need help. There's a humility there. There's an acknowledgement. There's a change in posture or orientation that says like, hey, I know like I can't figure this out on my own, and I need somebody to come alongside and help me. And so I think there has to be that moment when you realize like I can't go alone. I'm not supposed to, and I need somebody to help me. So I think it's maybe that simple that you just come to that point, and for some people it takes a long time of struggle, and I think other people figure that out, more quickly.
Yeah.
I'd love to know if you think this is a mistake. It feels like I meet a lot of small business owners who feel like the mountaintop is numbers. Like that's the clarity. Like the clarity is we need to make $2 million this year.
Yeah.
Is that clear enough? Is a number clear enough? Is it, I'm just curious because I don't know actually.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, if you've ever heard or watched Simon Sinek's work, Start with the Why.
Yes.
I actually think a number is not powerful enough. And the reason is because it's not the why.
It is
like the numbers are just a part of the story, and they're necessary. And I mean, we need to name those things, but like, what's your why? Like numbers at the end of the day, like do not get people up in the morning.
No, I agree.
But there's a deeper why that always is rooted in purpose. One of the things I like to tell all of our clients is that, the when we talk about spiritual things, what we're really talking about is the realm of purpose. And we're all meant to like live for a purpose that's bigger than ourselves. And that's what people sign up for. That's what gets you up in the morning. So I think I think the mountain has to have some element of the why.
Yep.
That keeps you moving.
I agree.
Yeah.
I have seen that not motivate people.
Right. Yeah.
And let me add a layer to that, because I've often gotten the question, especially in career coaching, people thinking about their path and their purpose. Like there's this internal battle between, is it selfish for me to think about that? Or that's way too pie in the sky. It's not practical enough. I think that there's also one lens that I've thought about it through is there are parts that are about you and parts that are about others. And so like with career, there are your skills and your passions and your needs, and that matters. Don't discount that. People love to try and be selfless and discount that. No, that matters. And how you help other people matters too. And that's your why. That's where the purpose comes in. So even with organizations, I think there's that dual, okay, sometimes if you're struggling with purpose feeling too big and existential, you can also think about, okay, what are the ways that we don't just help ourselves, the numbers, what are also the ways that we help others? That like internal and external is, we can tend to focus on one over the other. But both are important.
Yeah, and I think a thought that comes to mind with that, I think an important like complementary skill is what I call zoom in, zoom out, is that like sometimes like you're the why, the big objective, like you're like, this is why I started this company or whatever, which is really good and to keep out there. But sometimes it's like too big and in a moment. And I found like one principle I've sort of leaned into over the years is like, especially in crisis. So, I think this is appropriate, like when we're talking mostly to leaders who feel stuck, they're in some sort of like mini crisis situation. In crisis, we need to get small. And so part of the way to get small is to zoom in a little bit more and to say, maybe that big why, it's too ethereal, it's too out there. And so we need to like zoom in a bit, chunk down a bit and say like, we need something that's a little bit more tangible, a little bit more like a shorter term win or something like that.
Well, that relates to something I wanted to ask you, Gabe, because you said around this topic, how often we see leaders are kind of talking around the problem or complaining about things they can't control, and how that doesn't help with the process of getting clarity.
Yep. Oh man, now we're in the deep water, but this could be a whole nother episode, but I'll answer it this way. And this is something I'm doing a lot of personal work. I'm working with my coach on, and it's the work of mindset. And in mindset, there's really two poles, like, right? On the one side, we can lean into a victim mentality, and that's the mentality that life is happening to me all the time. And on the other side of that is radical agency, that like I have agency and I'm taking responsibility. And we can land on that. We all land on that spectrum somewhere. But I think like on the one side, like when we like are in the victim mindset and life is happening to us, what happens is we talk around problems, we make excuses. We say, well, you know what, this is a dynamic that keeps happening. These are things that are outside of my control. This person keeps acting this way, that you don't understand the equity firm that owns us. They have all these rules. And it's really just talking around this like, this giant hole in the ground, right? That like I can't do anything about, and I'm living in that mindset. So I think what has to happen is, and part of what we want to help people do is like shift out of that and go, hey, part of the beauty of being a human being is you are made to have agency and you're made to be creative and free. And that's a mind, before things change externally, they change internally. And that shift in thinking that I'm a free agent and asking the question, what can I do? Where can I affect change? And then areas where I can't, just saying, let's just stop talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is helpful. I feel like I'm in a part of my journey learning a version of that is, okay, just because that hole in the ground is there and we have this problem doesn't mean like I'm a failure or that we need to just wallow in, what's going wrong. But it's actually okay to name it, the clarity of naming the stuck point.
Right.
And then working on what you can control,
right? Versus
just the fear of, oh, that problem is also going to expose my flaws, right? It's scary. It goes back to the fear thing again.
Yeah,
it can be scary.
What's an image of? Imagine you're standing on the edge of a giant hole in the ground, and it's so deep you can't see the bottom of it, and you just keep standing on the edge and you just keep holding on and you keep looking down and going, oh my gosh, there's a giant hole in the ground, and all the while there's a path, there's a staircase behind you that you can just turn around and walk out of it and choose to walk away from it.
Yeah.
Like you can choose to do that, or you can keep staring at the hole in the ground and be afraid.
I'm leaving this conversation thinking one main thing. Because if you're like me, clarity that's just a big topic, but we do feel it every day at work. The areas where there's a lack of clarity are painful. And so I know that for a lot of people, myself included, it can start to feel impossible. Like it's actually going to be impossible to get clarity in this area. And one of my takeaways from this conversation is, although it is not easy, it is very possible to start getting clarity if you can, like Gabe said, just say the word help and actually shift your posture to wanting to fix this or wanting to get clarity. And then B, actually just naming reality. And I love how we talked about naming reality of where we're at and naming reality of where we're going, and how often we just skip that conversation. So if this is an area resonating with you, this is probably the main way that Greenhouse helps teams especially, is naming where you're at, naming where you're going, and creating a path to get there. So definitely reach out if that's where you're at. But think about what's that next step, that next conversation to name reality and create some clarity.